Welcome to Beyond Cerebral, a community that seeks lasting transformation in individual lives by moving beyond the cerebral to live in the revelation of Jesus Christ. Thanks for tuning in today. If you want to learn more about our community, connect with us by scanning the QR code on your screen.
We are back looking at the series of living with an abundant heart. And what does it look like to live with a heart of abundance? And our monthly challenge this month is to identify one area in your life that you feel a not enough or a scarcity mindset. And then find a Bible verse, and you can reach out to your core group facilitator to help you with this if you want. But find a Bible verse that connects with that area and meditate on it for about 5 minutes a day. You can do more, but we challenge you to do 5 minutes. And write down what you receive from this time. And I would also say keep a written journal of the actions you've taken in response, because I think that as you document this, as we continue through this month, you'll see a great power and transformation by taking these specific action steps. And you're going to want a record of that, because sometimes the enemy comes and tries to steal your victory, but we want you to live in the power and the freedom of Christ.
Thanks, Debbie. And today we're going to jump into talking about the difference between being a survivor versus an overcomer. And as somebody who was a self-proclaimed survivor for a very long time, was very proud that I could just survive all the things that happened in my life. I'm very happy to say that, once I walked with Jesus and really learned how to be an overcomer, it is a much better place to be. It just makes you feel like a more solid and a more whole person, I would say. So I lived in survivor mode for years and years, a very long time, just trying like day to day to make it through the hard things that were going in my life and feeling like, every day that I could make it to the next day was a win. Like, yes, I survived that last one. Let's get through this next one. It was really hard. But I was just bound in bitterness and depression and self-hatred. It really wasn't until I sought the Lord for healing and went through some real, like deep counseling and walked through some things to see that healing, that I truly felt like I turned the corner and became an overcomer. The difference is vast in that. Surviving is, again, it's when you talk about survival mode just in life in general, it's like, okay, I'm just trying to make it. Versus being an overcomer, you are thriving. You can walk through things come at you, they don't affect you because you're in an overcomer mindset instead of just that survival. It's definitely the switch from surviving is more as a victim, and overcoming is more you're walking in victory. So I really appreciate, just the difference in the two. In the Bible, John 16:33 says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. And remembering that we live from a place of victory. Jesus has overcome the world, therefore so have we, right? If he lives inside of us, we need to remember that we're in that mindset. We should not be playing defense all the time. It's okay that we play offense, that we're like, okay, I know what's coming and I know how to walk through hard times, walk through things that may come against me, because I know that God has already given me the victory. He helps me win in every situation. In this specific verse in John 16, he was talking to his disciples. He was encouraging them, to have peace, because he knew the world was going to get crazy for them. He knew that when he left, there was going to be persecution. There were going to be hard times. There were things that they were going to have to go through. And even in his leaving, that was hard for them. Obviously, they're grieving, they lost him. But he was saying, it's okay, guys, take heart. Don't worry. I have overcome the world, so you can too. And I think that's just a beautiful picture for us to remember that, we get to overcome because he overcame.
And I love that you kind of brought up even the disciples' example of they were grieving. And I think sometimes we really feel that mindset of I'm just barely making it when we go through something that makes us grieve. And so maybe we can kind of lean into that a little bit, because grief has come to all of us, whether it's a broken relationship or a death of a loved one or somebody that we care about, or a loss of something that was important to us. Grief touches everybody at some point in their life. There's no way to get around it. And how do we live and walk in victory and not almost withdraw into that that mindset of, well, I'm just barely making it. I'm just barely making it. And not that we don't have emotions, because there's a balance, right?
Of course.
Of living in that victory, and yet also feeling that loss.
As somebody who's lived as a survivor who had for a long time, that would be one of the things. Like if something comes against you and you're in survival mode, then you can tend to wallow in that. Like, okay, so there's a difference. If your parent passes away, for instance, we're not saying please just go out and be happy go lucky, you're a victor, you're an overcomer, just walk through it. Like, no, of course there's going to be emotions, there's going to be a grief process, there's going to be things that you have to walk through, but the key is you walk through it, you don't sit in it. And that is really the difference, is you are looking to God to help you walk through whatever you're going through and come out the other side. When you are just surviving, you're just sitting in it. You're not, there isn't an, I'll say there isn't an end. You just want to like just sit there and just like, okay, I'm just going to figure it out day by day. Like, no, God wants to walk with you and help you overcome and help you find joy again after the sorrows, after the hard times that we go through, knowing that He is on the other, that He's with us in it, and that there's hope and joy on the other side of it.
Yeah, and I know that walking through some things that have caused a lot of grief over the last year, one thing that God really revealed to me in the middle of it, when the feelings were really, really big and we were processing and it was really hard, was, grief is almost a different expression of love. It means that you loved deeply, or continue to love deeply, depending on the situation. But it's an expression. It's not a feel good, warm, fuzzy expression of love. That one we all love. That one's fun, right? And enjoyable. But it's a hard expression of, you know what, I loved deeply here and I valued this highly here, and something happened that was unexpected, or caused a breaking away of some sort, something negative, and then the love gets expressed in the form of grief. And so I think when I walked through my hard things and I understood that, I was able to more fully embrace the grieving process and then come out on the other side with more victory, because I was like, it just means that I love. I have a big mushy heart and I love. And that's all it means. And so it's just a part of being human. I think too, when you talked about a child who goes through hard things and then you grow up, I mean, even just one thing I've noticed with interacting with different people and different situations in my life, that people who go through really hard things as a child and they kind of get put into this survivor mode, almost like they don't even realize that is their mode. Like they just think this is how I am. One, which I would challenge you in that God doesn't call us to that, even if that's where you are right now. He can call you out of it and He can pull you out of that. But two, one thing I notice is it almost like reduces the problem solving. It's like something happens and there's one solution. But reality is there's a lot of different solutions that can solve one problem. But the people that I have engaged with that have that survivor mentality, it's like, oh no, this is it. This is the only one. And it's like, well, so if you're just kind of take a moment there to pause and think, is that me? Maybe that's an indicator that you have that survivor mode, and maybe you're not even aware of it. Because sometimes we can get in modes And we're not even aware that we're operating under a false sense of the way that God made us. And we just kind of go in auto mode and live our lives. And God has so much better for us. And we don't even realize it.
Yeah. And that's so good, Debbie. And that is so true. There are people who get stuck in that mode and don't realize that's even what they're doing. That is a huge part of therapy and counseling when you go through those things. If a trained counselor knows the questions to ask, and you'll realize, oh, that's why I'm doing this thing. Like you'll have some sort of an action or a thing that you're doing and you don't even realize it. For me, honestly, it was, I think, more like a guy than like a girl. So I have all these boxes in my head that I can open and close at will. And that was part of my survivor mode. When things got hard and I didn't want to think about something, I would put it in a box, shut the lid, and be like, okay, that's on the shelf. I'm not worrying about that right now, just so that I could survive and make it through the next thing. And I didn't realize how unhealthy that was, but I was doing it subconsciously. A lot of survival mode things are very subconscious. You don't realize you're doing it. And then when you start realizing these things and even praying, like Debbie said, and asking the Lord to show you, are there things that I'm doing that I'm in survival mode that I'm not realizing? And then if God shows you things, then ask him to help you with it. Like, God, how do I stop doing this thing? How do I live in your abundance? Again, back to the grieving, even what Debbie was saying about that, about having a big heart and how that's loving, like that is what we're called to. There's a whole book of the Bible written about it called Lamentations, right? We're allowed to lament. We're allowed to have emotions and feelings. Again, it's just, what are we doing with them? And are we just sitting in them, or do we move on in them? It's really good to see yourself, and even asking God, how does he see you? And then try to see yourself in that light, because that changes things as well. 1 John 4:4 says, you, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. Again, the enemy is out there and he does want to keep us bound, and he does want to keep us in survival mode and not overcomer mode. So that's one of those things of like remembering that he is there and that he doesn't like you, which is fine. But remembering that God is an overcomer. Greater is he that is in us than Satan who is in the world. And how do we walk that out well and think about that? Again, Romans 12:21 says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So even the things that come against us, when we feel like we're going into survival mode, how do we overcome that with good? We go to the word, we worship, we ask for prayer, we spend time with people who are going to encourage us, so that we don't allow ourselves just, again, to sit in whatever we're dealing with. Again, the emotions are okay. God gave us emotions. We're supposed to express those things. But if you're just sitting in your room all day, all in your feelings, and not saying, okay, God, it's time for me to get up and go and overcome and go walk and do what I need to do, that's the difference. So again, we want to be in, overcomer mode instead of survivor mode. And so we talked about this a little bit, even in some of the things that I've said and that Debbie has said. But the big differences between surviving and overcoming, if you're a survivor, you're just trying to endure stuff. If you're an overcomer, you can emerge. Again, you emerge out of those things and move forward. If you're a survivor, you just want to maintain the peace. Like, let me just keep things good around me. And if you're an overcomer, you're restoring things. You're trying to make peace. You're trying to bring Jesus into situations that will help look like hope. Survivors are stuck in the past because you're still just trying to survive whatever those events were. Whereas overcomers use the past as a stepping stone. So they're trying to move forward. They're trying to find, again, God's treasure and what is in their future. What does it look like? What can we be doing? The survivor is a victim mentality. Overcomer is a victor mentality. Survivors just adapt to pressure. Whatever's going on, you're just trying to, again, it really is about controlling your situation. You're just trying to stay afloat, just trying to make it work, versus an overcomer who's creating change in their lives. And again, looking towards the future, trying to move forward. Um, Survivors look to others to fill their needs, where overcomers are fulfilled and flourishing. They don't need other people. They've learned how to lean on God, and they look to God and can walk in that and move forward. Again, survivor, low inner power, they're full of self-doubt, whereas an overcomer has a lot of power and confident in who we are. Again, you can be confident that you are no longer in whatever situation you were surviving, quote unquote. How do you be an overcomer and be confident where you're at, walking forward? And just so that it doesn't, we never want to make these things seem, we don't want to diminish anybody's situation. Any pain that you've walked through, anything that you've been through, I don't want to diminish that. I don't want to say that I'm an overcomer and therefore I forgot all the things that happened to me in my past. No, that's crazy. Of course, you remember that there are things that are happened, but it's honestly how you look at them. Do you look at them from a place, again, of still being a victim in those situations? Or are you a victor walking confidently in what the Lord has for you?
And I think sometimes some clues that we can tune into to see if we're that survivor versus overcomer. And we're putting these in very black and white boxes, right? I mean, a lot of time
there's a lot of gray in there.
There's a lot of gray. Okay. And especially as you're growing, you might see more and more gray as you move out of one and into another. So just kind of throwing that out there too. But that was such a great breakdown, Mosel. Thank you for sharing that, of, just some indicators of what does it look like to be a survivor versus an overcomer. But I think a lot of times it can leak out in your speech. Like, I know I went through a season of saying, I can't do this. I just can't. Or I'm overwhelmed. And like, that there's that word prediction, whatever on your phone that you just tap the middle one like 5 times or whatever. And what comes up. And one time I did that, and it was just talking about how overwhelmed I was. And I was like, do I really say that much? Like, I didn't even know. That was something I said and texted on a regular basis. And that's not an overcomer mindset. You're just surviving. If you're always flooded and feeling overwhelmed, that is more, I would just challenge you. That's probably more of a survivor mindset. Maybe you need to look at your life and build more margins. Maybe you need to do some counseling, some therapy. Maybe you need to recalibrate your nervous system, and you can look into that. There are resources out there for that, especially if you look up sensory integration or the sensory diet. It has nothing to do with food, people. But if you look up those kinds of things, it'll go through the different sensory systems in our body and give you strategies of things that you can do at home, or maybe buy something on Amazon as a tool to recalibrate your nervous system. Because sometimes that's it too. We go through life and our nervous system keeps getting escalated. And then before we know it, we're in survivor mode. So again, you can kind of flip back and forth a little bit throughout the day, depending on what's going on and how you're feeling and whatnot. But the goal is to really lean into grace. So what I've seen, just a story from my own life, years ago, I did this whole, I'm overwhelmed. And then somebody said, why do you just keep saying how overwhelmed you are? Doesn't that reinforce it? And I was like, oh yeah, I guess it does. And so then I started changing my speech, becoming more aware and leaning more into, okay, God, what's my best yes? Or how do I increase the capacity, or leaning into grace rather than leaning into my own strength. Sometimes when I think of surviving, I think you're always like striving and reaching up to try to manage, versus overcoming. You're coming and you're standing on top in victory. Yeah. And one time God gave me a dream. I was about to go to college. It was the summer before I graduated high school, and I was about to go to college, and I was overwhelmed. I was scared, all those things, leaving home for the first time, going from my Christian bubble into a secular university. That was totally terrifying to me. And God gave me a dream where I saw this mountain and it looked so big and impossible to climb, and I was overwhelmed in my dream. Like, I can never get over this. Like, I knew I had to get over it, and I had no idea how I was even going to begin to get over this. And then all of a sudden the scene shifted, and God had picked me up and put me on top of the mountain, and it looked like a little pebble now. Like, I was standing on one of those rocks or whatever that you find out there that you kind of climb up a little bit and then you stand on top of, and it's no big deal. And God said, my grace is more than enough to help you overcome any mountain that you may face in your life. And I've held on to that. And, that's for everybody. That's not just for me. God's grace is more than enough to help you overcome any mountain that you may face in your life. So when you have a challenging situation, rather than falling into your own strength and going into survivor mode, lean into the grace of God, because he can pick you up and put you right on top of that mountain so you can get to the other side in victory. Because as Mosel said so beautifully, we live from a place of victory. We don't live trying to get to victory. We fight and we live from victory, because Christ, Jesus, is the victory in our lives. And when you follow Jesus and you've accepted him into your heart as Lord and Savior, that is your inheritance, victory. And we need to really hold on to that in our lives.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you in that, Debbie, and love that. That was just such a great analogy, such a great picture of what it looks like to be an overcomer. How do we do that? How do we stand on those rocks? So as we continue the conversation in our groups, how does it look different to survive a situation versus overcome one?
How can we mine our past for treasure without getting stuck in it?
Is it possible to become an overcomer without first being a survivor? Why or why not?
What strategies can we use to shift a victim story into a victor story?
And how can we maintain an overcomer mindset when in the middle of a difficult, prolonged challenge?
Thank you for tuning in today. We pray you were encouraged and inspired. Scan the QR code to connect with our community and continue the conversation in a core group with one of our facilitators. Join options are in person, remote in, or virtual. Be blessed.